The Battle of Winterfell had ended in disaster. Arya Stark tried to kill the Night King, but she failed. Bran Stark was captured, and the Night King took all of his memories as the three-eyed raven. Winterfell fell. Jon Snow, Daenerys, Tyrion, Sansa, and a small group of survivors barely escaped south. Behind them, the army of the dead grew larger than ever before. Now the story continues. The sun rose over the ruins of Winterfell, but its light did not bring any comfort at all. Smoke drifted slowly from the shattered towers. The snow-covered battlefield stretched out endlessly all around the broken castle. Thousands of bodies lay frozen exactly where they had fallen the night before. But the dead did not stay still for long. Across the field, blue eyes began opening one by one. Fallen Northerners, Dothraki riders, Unsullied soldiers, and knights from every corner of Westeros slowly rose up from the snow. Their faces were pale and completely lifeless. Their souls were gone forever. The army of the dead had grown even larger than it had ever been before. From a distant ridge, Jon Snow watched this nightmare happen. Every single soldier they had lost now belonged to the Night King. Every sacrifice they had made only made the enemy stronger. This realization weighed heavily on Jon's heart. Humanity had not simply lost one battle. It had fed the very force that wanted to destroy it completely. Beside him, Daenerys stared silently down at the army below them. Even she, a woman who had crossed deserts and conquered entire kingdoms, struggled to understand how badly they had been defeated. Drogon and Rhaegal circled overhead, restless and clearly uneasy. The dragons could sense something deeply unnatural spreading across the whole world. Without saying another word, the survivors continued their long, desperate journey south. The road quickly filled up with more and more refugees. Villages that had survived for many generations were suddenly abandoned overnight. Families packed whatever belongings they could carry and rushed toward the riverlands. Stories spread even faster than the travelers themselves could move. Some people claimed Winterfell had been swallowed whole by darkness. Others spoke of dragons made entirely of ice, and armies that simply could not die. At first, most people refused to believe such wild tales. But as more and more refugees kept arriving, that disbelief slowly turned into real fear. Entire regions fell into panic. Merchants abandoned their trade routes completely. Farmers left their fields behind, crops and all. The roads became like rivers, filled with desperate people all moving south together. A few days later, the survivors finally reached the ruins of Moat Cailin. There, they paused briefly to gather whatever supplies they could find. Jon climbed to the top of one of the broken towers and looked north across the land. What he saw chilled him even more than the freezing winter wind. On the horizon, an enormous storm was moving steadily southward. It stretched from one side of the world to the other as far as his eyes could see. Lightning flashed inside its dark, swirling clouds. Snow whipped and swirled beneath it violently. At the very center of the storm rode the Night King himself. The distance between them was shrinking a little more with every single passing day. Far to the south, life continued almost completely normally inside King's Landing. The capital city remained crowded and noisy, totally unaware of the terrible catastrophe unfolding beyond the neck. Merchants argued loudly over prices in the busy streets. Sailors filled the crowded taverns with laughter and songs. Noble families attended feasts and celebrations, just like they always had. Sitting on the Iron Throne was Queen Cersei Lannister. She was completely convinced that she had outsmarted every single rival who had ever dared to challenge her. News coming from the north meant very little to her. She saw all the warnings as exaggerated tales, made up simply to scare southern lords into supporting Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. When the very first raven arrived carrying news about Winterfell's destruction, Cersei just laughed at it. When the second raven arrived, she dismissed it without a second thought. By the time the third raven came, she had ordered her advisors to stop wasting her time with what she called northern nonsense. Euron Greyjoy encouraged her doubt at every turn. He openly mocked the frightening stories in front of everyone. According to him, dead men could not possibly march and dragons could not possibly freeze the entire world. King's Landing had already survived wars, rebellions and invasions before. Surely it would survive this too, he believed. But the city could not ignore reality forever. The very first refugees arrived within only a few weeks. Hundreds of them entered through the city gates. Then thousands more followed. Then tens of thousands after that. Their arrival shocked the ordinary citizens of King's Landing deeply. These were not simply soldiers spreading wild rumors. These were regular, everyday people carrying very visible signs of terror on their faces. Many of them had lost family members along the way. Some carried wounds from terrifying encounters with the dead. Others arrived with absolutely nothing except the clothes they were wearing. But every single one of them told the exact same story. Winterfell had fallen. The dead were coming for everyone. Fear began spreading through the entire city faster than any sickness ever could. Food prices doubled almost overnight. Shops closed early every single day. Wealthy families quietly began preparing ships in secret, just in case they needed to flee at any moment. Rumors filled every corner of King's Landing constantly. Some people claimed the Night King had already crossed the neck. Others believed dragons were already burning entire cities in the north. Every single day the stories became even more frightening than the day before. Meanwhile, Jon Snow and the surviving leaders of Westeros set up a temporary headquarters inside the ruins of Harrenhal. This ancient fortress had witnessed countless wars throughout its long history, but it had never seen anything quite like this before. Lords and commanders from all across the Seven Kingdoms gathered there together. Some arrived leading full armies behind them. Others brought only a small handful of loyal followers. For perhaps the very first time in many generations, rival houses sat together beneath the same roof, united by one common enemy. The atmosphere inside the great hall felt tense and heavy. Jon stood before all the assembled lords and told them the complete truth. He spoke about Winterfell's fall. He described Bran's death in detail. He revealed that the Night King now possessed all the knowledge of the three-eyed raven. As these terrible details came out, the looks of disbelief on people's faces slowly turned into pure horror. The entire room fell completely silent. But not everyone was willing to accept the truth. Several southern lords accused Jon of lying outright. Others insisted that the north had simply lost an ordinary battle, nothing more unusual than that. A few argued that the safest choice was to abandon Westeros entirely and flee across the narrow sea as fast as possible. Arguments broke out all across the hall. Old grudges resurfaced instantly. Ancient rivalries poisoned every single discussion. Humanity stood right on the brink of complete extinction, yet many of these lords still seemed to care more about politics than about actual survival. Tyrion Lannister watched all this chaos unfold with growing frustration. He realized something important in that moment. The Night King did not even need to defeat humanity himself. Humanity seemed absolutely determined to destroy itself all on its own. Then another scout arrived at the fortress gates. The man looked completely exhausted. His horse had nearly collapsed beneath him from the long, hard ride. Snow covered his armor, even though he had ridden all the way from lands where snow almost never fell. The scout delivered news that silenced the entire room instantly. Every single abandoned castle along the retreat route had fallen. Every village left behind during the long retreat had joined the enemy's ranks. The dead were multiplying far faster than anyone had ever imagined possible. The army of the dead no longer numbered in the hundreds of thousands. It now numbered in the millions. A heavy silence settled over all of Harrenhal. For the very first time, every single lord in that room understood the terrible truth. This war could not possibly be won just by counting soldiers and numbers. Every death only strengthened the enemy further. Every single battle made the Night King even more powerful than before. That night, Jon stood completely alone upon the tall walls of Harrenhal. In the far distance he could see unusual, strange weather spreading steadily across the horizon. Rivers were freezing solid right before his eyes. Forests were dying all around. Winter was advancing at an unnatural, terrifying speed. It felt as if the Night King himself was reshaping the entire world. Far to the north, standing atop a frozen hill, the Night King surveyed his massive, growing army below him. Endless ranks of undead soldiers stretched out toward the horizon in every direction. White Walkers stood perfectly motionless beside him, silent and still. Above them, Viserion circled slowly through the heavy storm clouds. The Night King closed his eyes and recalled all the memories he had stolen from Bran Stark. Ancient secrets flowed freely through his mind. Hidden paths that no living person knew about. Forgotten magic from ages long past. The many weaknesses of mankind itself. He knew exactly where he was going next. King's Landing. The very heart of Westeros. The final kingdom of men left standing. And as the massive storm rolled steadily southward, the Night King allowed himself a small, cold smile. Humanity's last chance was quickly running out.